So I wonder how many of you have had this conversation. It's before a birthday, Christmas, anniversary. The conversation goes something like this. What do you want for your birthday this year? And the answer comes back, I don't know. Just get me something. The answer comes, well, you never like what I get you. If you just tell me what you want, I'll get it. Well, if I wanted it, I'd just go get it myself. So just surprise me. And there's something inside of you that says, I want to get them something they like, but I don't know what to get. Now, for all of you who are the most creative person in the world, and you have these cool surprises for birthdays and anniversaries and all this kind of stuff, you don't get this. But the rest of us are going, what do we get them? That's why, we have this huge gift card industry. When you don't know what to get them, you just get a gift card and everyone just seems happy. Here's the problem we're struggling with. We have everything. And when you have everything, what can someone get you that you're happy with and excited about? The person who has everything. But we're in the book of Ecclesiastes. We're talking about a guy by the name of Solomon who was king of Israel who had everything. More than the everything that you and I can even connect with. This guy had it. And if he didn't have it, he knew where to get it and he knew how to get it. We've read about it already. Houses and palaces. And he had the women, and he had food, and he had castles. You name it, he had it. He had people coming from all over the world to check out his wisdom. He wrote phenomenal things. And the interesting thing about the story of Solomon, a guy who had everything, is that in the end, he sits down to pen this little book called Ecclesiastes, and he writes down the words, meaningless. Here's why this is important for us this morning. We all have much. And we all find ourselves rushing out of this place today on what we're calling a chase. That's why this is important. By the way, the chase. So as we talk about the chase, I think oftentimes we're gonna really shade this word as sort of a negative thing because you chase, and at the end you cry out meaningless. Or as one translation said smoke. It's just like, so we chased after all this for what? So a bunch of years ago now, I love looking for cars. I love shopping for cars. I love buying cars. I love the process of doing it. I start thinking about my next car years before I want it or need it. And so I'm constantly researching cars, looking at cars. I think about cars a lot. And so there was a car that I had wanted from the time I was a young guy. And so I had researched this car, and I was constantly looking to see what the prices of those cars were, hoping to find that outlier price, trying to find that good deal on that car and all that kind of stuff. And finally that day comes to buy that car, and I go through all sorts of negotiating and this kind of thing. And I finally, I nail it. I get the right price, I get the right car, and it's just this phenomenal story. And we're driving home from the dealership in my dream car that I had worked on for years and saved up for, and all of a sudden I'm actually driving this car home. And my wife goes, "Aren't you excited?" And I said, "Not really." She goes, "Why?" "The chase is over." I love the chase. So we come into this room this morning admitting, right, that for many of us, we love the chase. Even though when we begin to look at Ecclesiastes, we're going to come out at the end going, yeah, I know. There's a moment where at the end of the chase you go, meaningless. But we're talking to a group of people who are in the chase, and there's a piece of that chase that we really, really love. And yet at the end we say, why? Now, you and I know people like Solomon. They touch it, it turns to gold. They buy it, it doubles in value. They write it, it goes viral. They get introduced to someone, and all of a sudden they have a whole new friend group that leads them to connections they never dreamed of having. And you go, how? How do they do that? That was this guy, Solomon. He had it all. And at the end of his life, he sits down to write some things down for us. And here's why this is important for us. Every one of us has, let's just use the word riches. Each one of us has wealth. And what we do with that is going to cause us at the end to sit down and jot it down and say, meaningless. Or maybe, just maybe, if we can get to this point where we stop right now and make some decisions about it, at the end, we can say, I leveraged that, and it did something major important with that mattered. The problem is if we don't somehow figure this out right now, at the end, we're going to be writing the same words that Solomon wrote. Vanity, vanity. I don't want to say vanity. I don't want to go through this chase. I don't want to go through this life and at the end say vanity. But if I'm going to be really honest, that car that was such a great chase, I haven't had that in many, many years. It's probably in a crusher somewhere right now. It's probably rusted out. Some kid's driving it, has it all looking goofy. It would be sad to see that car today. You just sort of step back and go, why? What? I want to take you to a verse in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 10 and 11. And as I introduce this verse, I want to tell you a phrase I learned years ago that I believe this verse just pictures. And the phrase is this: needs multiply when they are met. Needs multiply when they're met. And not too long ago, we had a plumbing leak. Just a little drain pipe leaking, but this crazy drain pipe leaking out of the shower leaked down through the ceiling, and you've seen it. And you realize, oh, I got to deal with this. So you cut the ceiling out, and you get up there, and a 2-minute fix now creates a big hole in the ceiling that needs fixed. So I realized, well, I'm going to have to call in a drywaller, and I've wanted to rearrange these lights in the ceiling. So if a drywaller is going to come fix that hole, I might as well create a few more holes. So I move a whole bunch of lights around in my ceiling. So a stupid little drain pipe leaking creates a hole. Now my wife comes home, and she has 5 more holes in her kitchen ceiling because I decided I didn't like the location of the lights. Needs multiply when they're met. So finally I have the drywaller come in, and he fixes all the drywall holes, and when he leaves, it's phenomenal. And I decide to paint the ceiling, and that's all fine. And when we're done painting the ceiling, we say, wouldn't it be nice if we repainted the walls? Well, if we're going to repaint the walls, do we want to change the color? Needs multiply when they're met. So you change the color of the walls and say, that accent rug would look nice if it was a different color. So you get the different color accent rug, and your couch doesn't look nice with that anymore. Needs You laugh like you know what I'm talking about. Needs multiply when they're met. Let's read this, Ecclesiastes 5, 10, and 11. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. So here's that where I get that phrase. When goods increase, they increase who eat them, and what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Now, what we're not going to say here today is that money is a bad thing. I'm just going to say money's fine. In fact, I would say money's neutral. I mean, it's a tool. It's something that you use to accomplish a task. So we're not here to say money's bad. What's the Bible say here? The love of money is bad. And what it says here is even if it's used as a tool, that money will never satisfy. And the sooner we figure that out, we begin to realize that we have to check our heart whenever we're using money. What's going on with this money? Is money the thing that helps us figure out how to deal with life? Is money the thing, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, that we've placed our hopes on? Is money the thing that we think somehow will help our dreams come true? Solomon, a guy at the end of his life, jotting down, says, listen, guys, when you start going down that path, you're in this mode of loving money. And he says, I want you to hear this. Money will never satisfy. Now, if we talk about the love of money and saying that's the problem, most of us in this room would say, I don't think I have a love of money. And as we think it through, yeah, I don't think that's me. But we look at someone else and say, but they do. And normally that someone else is someone that has a step or two steps more than us. So this is what I'm going to say here. I'm going to suggest to us that while we look at someone else and say they have a problem with a love of money, I'm going to suggest to us here that we actually have a me problem. It's easy to look somewhere else. We need to look in here. The me problem. Ecclesiastes 5:13 and 14. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner. And I underlined these words in my Bible, to his hurt. So when we get riches, there is a tendency to try to hoard those, gather them to ourselves. And then it says this, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. He is the father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. Evidently, he gathered these things to himself, and yet at the end of the day, he lost them, didn't even have anything to pass along. Now, my observation is that the me problem that we have is that we think that we have created this wealth, that we are where we are because of our hard work, where we're at because we get up early, because we got a great education, because when we studied when no one else was willing to study. And all of a sudden this focus comes in on me. And translated, I would say, this is my ability, me. My hard work, my ambition, my smarts. It's so easy to see this me problem in others. You see someone that we define as wealthy, because we don't define ourselves as wealthy, because we've sort of gotten used to this level of living. And when we level out at our level of living, we have a tendency to constantly be stretching up and pretending we're at a higher level of living. That's why so many people struggle with debt and never have a penny extra, even though their income continues to go up. You look at that person at that next level or two levels up, and so often, and we love to do it with those who are, the icons of wealth, and you hear it reported in the news how much they give to charity, and we all go, oh, if I had that much money, I would be giving it to this. I would be doing that. And then you step back and you recognize that, wow, I'm sitting here looking at that person saying what they should do. And we go, look how they're wasting it. Just like he said here in this verse. Lost it in a bad venture. What a waste of this money to spend it on that. Why is he wasting it on that excess? He could do it so much better and do something that matters more. And yet there's someone who doesn't have as much as we have, looking up at us going, look at them. Look how they're using what they have. We see that taking place here. And the comment is, if I had as much as they had, I would leverage it. I would use it to make something happen that would matter. And here would be my question to you today. What has God given you? Here's the me problem that we're faced with in this conversation back and forth. What has God given you? And what do you think God was hoping when he gave it to you that you'd do with it? And that's where I'm going to try to lead us to think about here this morning. God's given you what you have, regardless where you fit on that scale. When he gave it to you, what was on his mind that you would do with what he's given you? Solomon had a higher standard of living, from everything I can tell, than probably anyone that I know in this room. And at the end of the day, when he sits down to write, he says, of all that stuff, everything that I had, the meaning in it is rather elusive. I don't know what to do with it. You get Solomon, he's Old Testament guy, writing down his experiences. Just sort of journaling that, I think rambling as we go through this book, talking about just whatever comes to his mind next. So you wonder, is this just one guy's experience? What does God say about this? What is God's thought? Is this just one guy's experience and one guy's thoughts? Or is there something else in our Bible that really reinforces this? I want to take you to a New Testament passage in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. I want you to hear this verse. I'm going to put it up on the screen. As for the rich in this present age, remember, we look to someone 2 steps beyond us and call them rich. Someone's looking at you from 2 steps behind calling you rich, so just take it on yourself. As for the rich of this present age, charge them not to be haughty. Now here's the next phrase that I want you to hear. Nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God. Your life, I want to tell you, carries a message of hope. Everyone in this room, your life carries a message of hope to those who are watching in. Now, in case that sounds positive, here's the hope that it carries. Here's the message that it is telegraphing out to everyone of hope. I hope in my money. I am confident that my money can take care of me. I've got a credit card I can swipe. Actually, chip now. And I know that when I stick that in there, I can fix just about anything. So your message is telegraphing out a message saying, my hope is in my money. Paul says, please, gang, don't put your hope in the uncertainty of riches. That changes. That's going to mess you up over the time. Don't say that your life is hoping on what you have financially. He says instead, here's what I want you to do. I want you to put it on God. And I want you to hear the last part of this verse here. Who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. So I think oftentimes when we think about, there's this possibility of hoping on my wealth, which we know is wrong. But boy, that's when we can really enjoy it. That if I have stuff and I can spend it my way, and then I can really enjoy it and I can have fun with that. And Solomon says at the end of his life, guys, that was elusive. Nothing came of it that was worthwhile. Paul says, be very careful about that. You can place your hope on the uncertainty of riches. In other words, they're going to fail you, or they have the possibility of failing you. Or you can put your hope in God. And what I love when he says that here is that when you do that, those last words there are so cool, where it says, you can enjoy them. Provides us with everything to enjoy. I want you to see God through this lens. He's not in this mode of taking away from you. trying to withhold something from you. He's trying to say, if you'll put your hope in me, knowing that I provide, you're going to have a life of joy. You are going to enjoy. I want you to be blessed by it. I gave it to you as a gift. I want you to have fun with it. Can you imagine giving your kid a toy and saying, I hope you don't enjoy that? It's not what God's doing. He delights in seeing you there on the floor playing with that toy. He delights in seeing you enjoy the gifts that he's given you. So we're set with a choice, the chip card, where all of my problems will just be solved. I know I can fix everything in the moment with what I have financially. Or, wait a minute, I'm going to depend on God. If you've ever been at that place where all the money in the world can't fix whatever your situation at this moment is, you're in that moment where you have to step back and go, God, I depend on you. And I believe today that one of the things that he's trying to tell every one of us is we are so easily drawn to fixing with our credit card, and he's begging us, change that mindset, be satisfied with me, and I am going to fill you up with joy. I'm going to meet your needs. Depend on my credit card, depend on God. Which one you choose is going to, one, my credit card, lead to what Solomon would call vanity and meaninglessness. Depend on God. The word enjoy is on the screen there. Vanity, joy. I don't know about you, that I know which one I want to choose. This feeling of hopelessness, I'm like, so what? That's discouraging after you've worked really hard. Last verse I want to read to you is going to send us this message. If you'll follow the money trail, you'll find out who your master is. Money is an incredible indicator of what really matters a lot in our life. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them. There's our phrase again. We're back to Ecclesiastes. Remember, Paul said, God's given you these gifts to enjoy. Now Solomon says, wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them. Accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. And then he says that this is a gift of God. And then he ends it by saying, for he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the joy of his heart. Two things I want to leave us with here today. Two things I'd love for you to walk away here thinking about. When I read Ecclesiastes and I read Solomon's conclusions on a lot of this, I hear him say this: meaningless, 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 vanity, vanity, meaningless, vanity. And then he says, so just go out and have a burger and a glass of lemonade and just enjoy it. I see him over and over say, God's given you these gifts. Go sit down and enjoy them. Take a deep breath, smile, drink that cup of coffee, enjoy it. You're striving so hard, but just stop and enjoy what he's given you. It's a gift. I appreciate that, because I think sometimes we don't ever stop long enough to go, thank you, Jesus. Stop long enough and not feel guilty about taking the gifts that he's given us and enjoy them. So what gifts has he given you? You should not walk out of this room saying, wow, I've been given all this wealth. I really shouldn't enjoy this because this is bad. No, I think Solomon says, no, go enjoy it. Have a blast with it. Take a deep breath, take it in, and say, wow, God, thank you for giving this to me. For some reason, you've let me have this for this time to enjoy and to use. Is that an encouragement at all? Or do you see that as you read through Ecclesiastes? Don't feel bad about it. Enjoy it. So that'd be the first thing that I would say. The second thing, and if you're looking up on the screen, look at the second half of that verse. As he sort of wraps this section up, he says, for he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the joy of his heart. Two thoughts in this verse. If we're so occupied with God, we're not going to be focused in on our past. I think Solomon recognizes there's a lot of things I can look back on my life, and I can very much either be proud of myself for, or I can be bummed out about or discouraged about, and I can sit here and brood over those things. He says, let the past be the past. He says the guy and gal who is occupied with the joy of his heart, God is going to be at the center of his life. So here's the thought that comes into my mind, is what matters most to you is what you're going to spend your money on. What matters most is what you're going to do. What matters most to you is what you're going to do with your wealth. So we say here, follow the money. You're going to find out who the master is. So you sit there and enjoy it because God's given it to you, and then you decide while you're sitting there, how do I want to use this to do something that matters beyond this life, so that I don't just say it's elusive, so that I don't just say it's meaningless, so I don't just say it's vanity. And here's where I want to chat with us a little bit. What do we do with the wealth that God has given us? Most of us find ourselves in this mode because it's what is modeled for us in society, is whatever wealth has been given us, we leverage that wealth to get more debt so that we can show on a balance sheet to a lender that we can go get more debt. And then we go and we service that debt, because when needs are met, they create more needs. And we've seen that leaves you rather empty. But what if we were to say, wait a minute, God has given me this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to do something with this that matters beyond this life into eternity. That begins to be something that creates what he says here in this verse, a joy, because we're focused in on God. So let me talk to you about something that's been on my mind recently. It's so often that I go to a store and they say, would you like to put an extra $2 or $5 towards this cause or this need? I talk to many of you. There's different things that are constantly coming up at the office place where they're saying to you, hey, will you give to this? We're trying to collect to give a big gift to such and such. And so, and we call that charity. You don't have to go through Facebook very long and you find someone's GoFundMe account because they're doing something that they want you to help with. And they figure enough donations together will fund that. And a lot of the world gives to those causes, and they do that a lot, and a lot of good things come as a result of giving to those causes. What I'd like to throw out to you right now when I read this and I read these words, because God keeps him occupied with the joy of his heart, could I suggest to you as Christ followers to consider leveraging what God has given you for something that you're sure is massively eternal? So the next time you're asked for some of these other peripheral things, realize there's plenty of people given to those things. But I'd love to ask you to consider, what about giving to those places and those organizations, and I would say this church, that are focused in on this, making sure people don't go to hell for eternity, making sure people go to heaven for eternity, making sure that when you're giving, you're making it possible for someone to have life eternal as opposed to life separated from God. That you're giving towards a cause that helps people learn about what God believes the way we should live would be, as opposed to just solving their problem for another 10 minutes until that need met creates more needs. That you would be giving towards what I would call discipleship, where people can grow and learn in the Word of God. That's why you have the privilege of coming here every week, because you go, I want to hear what God has to say about this subject. My head's been full of a bunch of junk that's been given me all week long about what the world is suggesting on this. I would love to ask you, would you consider giving to something that God wants for other lives? And so as I talk to you, the Bible talks, and my wife and I have practiced it our entire married life, and prior to that, talks about giving the first 10% of our income back to God. And we believe that that comes to the local church, and from there, those monies get distributed. And that's what we do at the end of the message every week, and we give back. A lot of you practice that. Some of you have never really gotten into that practice yet. I just want you to know that it is one of the most freeing and valuable things. In the Old Testament of the Bible, in the book of Malachi, God says, would you test me in this? Try this. And it's this crazy concept that says, if you'll give to me, God says, try me in this, and I will open up the floodgates of heaven and bless you. And immediately everyone wants to say, well, you don't give to get blessed in return. But God says, test me. See if when you do that, because all of a sudden what's happening is we're putting our focus in on him, and we're saying, you're our master and we're depending on you. When we're keeping it, so you see this, follow the money, you'll find out who your master is. When we're keeping it, we're saying, I'm not sure if I'm going to have enough this week, so I'm going to hold it here. And that verse we read a few moments ago said that those who do that, it's to their hurt. I encourage you to underline that, to their hurt. Instead saying, I want him to be my master. So I'm going to just do what he says here. I'm going to give it back to him. And in so doing, here's what I'm doing. I get to the end of my life, and I know that the wealth that he gave me, I leveraged it to do something beyond this life. And I no longer step back and say that was elusive and meaningless. I go, there was meaning. There was purpose. And as this verse at the end of it says, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. Wouldn't you be joyful if you knew a whole lot less people are going to hell because you used what you had to keep them from going to hell and they're now going to heaven? Wouldn't it be cool if you knew that because you put some gifts in those buckets in a moment, that people are going to heaven as a result of it? And that's our vision here at Calvary. We want to see people come to the cross of Jesus, to meet Jesus. He saves lives. He changes lives. That's why we would encourage you, you know what? Invite people to the Easter service. Invite people to be here on a Sunday morning, because Jesus changes lives. He radically transforms lives. He's changed our lives. That's why we tell other people about it. Has he changed your life? Where are you, Stephen? I'm not convinced. Are you convinced, Stephen? I'm not convinced. See, if we're not convinced that he's changed our life, yeah, we wouldn't tell anyone else. But if we're convinced that he's changed our life, if we no longer carry that guilt and that weight of sin, we are convinced that he has changed our life. And we want to make sure that no one around us is carrying that weight of sin on them anymore. And we do everything we can. We tell them, we give. We do everything to make sure that they go to heaven so they spend eternity with God. Church, this is a burning passion of my heart. That's why we deal with the children the way we do. That's why we deal with the youth the way we do. We want to see them not go down the path of destruction. We want them to see them meet Jesus and know Jesus and follow Jesus and let Jesus change their lives. And if Jesus becomes their master, everything changes, and there's joy in their life, and there's a smile on their face, and there's happiness. You wonder why you run across all these mean people every day? You know why these people are so mean? You got so much bitterness and hate and sin in their lives. They need Jesus. Don't ignore them. Don't walk away from them. Share Jesus with them. Encourage you. Start investing in things that matter for eternity. Ask yourself, what am I doing with what I have for eternity? Let me pray for you. Jesus, anytime we talk about money, it gets really, really convicting. Because everything in us says we want to keep what we have. It's ours. You've given it to us. You said we can enjoy it. It's ours to use for a time and leverage for eternity. Lord, I pray that some of us in this room today will decide, yeah, I'm going to give that a try. I'm going to leverage it for eternity. I'm going to give it to something that matters for eternity. So even right now, Lord, as we give, I pray that you would use our gifts to glorify your name, that you would be pleased in Jesus' name. Amen. At the end